Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is When My Child Doesn't Want to, How to Motivate Stubborn Learners. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Judy, Amber, and Christy. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Welcome, Judy.
Hey, Steph, it's good to be here today. So I am Sunlight's marketing sales manager, and I am also a retired homeschool mom and a grandma of a second generation homeschooler. So it's good to be here, and it's great to see all these hellos rolling in already.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hi, Amber. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me here, Stephanie. My name is Amber Severance, and I am the mom of 5 children. I have graduated 3 out of my homeschool. I'm currently homeschooling a junior in high school and a 5th grader. So actually 6th grader as of a few weeks ago. So here I am, excited.
Very good. And Christy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today. And this is our 13th year of homeschooling with Sunlight. And we have one going off to college this fall. And we have a freshman, a junior, and a 7th grader. Those are all out of order. But anyway, yes, we have 3 boys here at home. And I'm excited to be here today.
Very good. Well, as a reminder, anytime you leave a comment, you will be added to a list of folks who are going to be winning prizes at the end of this. Summer readers, history, or hands-on history, electives. So definitely make sure in all of our sessions today, you are active and posting. We will draw the names from those sessions. And also, you want to make sure to just go back, and anything you missed from yesterday, go back and watch any of those replays, because we know that there was a lot of content. So remember, the replays will be available for 30 days after yesterday. So you have quite some time to go back through, or if you missed anything, you want to rewatch any of these, you certainly can. So let's get started with when my child doesn't want to. Let's talk a little bit about what a stubborn learner may look like. What do you guys think?
I wrote actually some things: dragging of heels, avoidance, complaining, excuses, delay after delay, refusing to prioritize so that, oops, I ran out of time again and didn't get to that subject. I have a little experience with that with 4 boys here.
I was going to say, I've homeschooled 5 children and have no clue what you're talking about when it comes to stubborn learner. Never, ever heard of that. I'm so sorry for all of
Lying.
you. Yeah, right. And I think just the pouting and everything Christy said, I think you covered it all, Christy, but the pouting and the body language and the throwing themselves on the bed and all of it. Stubborn learners, sure.
Yep, I think too, sometimes, and we'll probably cover this more in detail, but sometimes what looks like a stubborn learner might actually be a child who is a struggling learner. And so there is a difference.
Absolutely. I was going to say that. It comes across as stubborn or lazy, but sometimes they just really are struggling. So you have to sort of give that kid some grace. Let's see. Let's talk about that specifically. Like what's the difference between maybe a behavioral issue and a learning challenge?
Yeah, there's one obvious thing, right? If your child has done this task before and you know that they're capable and they're just refusing to, then it's stubborn. And that takes you into a different category, right? So this might be a discipline issue. This might be a mom needs to get a little more creative and try to make something a little fun. I'm sure we'll talk about that later also. But the difference is when a child is asked to do a task and there's constant resistance day after day, and mom's gut says, I think there's something going on. that is a time to check in, because moms have instincts about these things. And it's good also, if dad's in the picture, to pull him in and say, are you noticing anything? Or what do you think about this? So there is that. Also, checking that you are not requiring more of that child than is age appropriate or maturity appropriate. So sometimes we can have expectations that are much too high for the stage that that child might be in.
And sometimes it might be an issue for the day. So if you've got a kid that typically does well at a certain task, but today you get the digging in of the heels and the whining or the tears, then I would stop and think to yourself, how much sleep did this kid get last night? Did we have breakfast this morning, and did he or she actually eat it? Are there interpersonal relationship issues going on with siblings? Maybe your child misunderstood something you said and took it the wrong way. So sometimes it's a matter of saying, you know what, let's take a break. Let's take a juice break. Pour a glass of juice. Let's go out, sit under the tree at the picnic table, and let's just chat. And then remove the child from the situation. Get out of the room, get away from the table, the desk, or whatever, and talk with them face to face and just say, talk to me. I'm worried about what's going on with you. Tell me what's wrong. And it might take a little, tugging it out of them, because sometimes they can't verbalize right away what's going on. So you just have to be creative.
I think it can be hard on that question sometimes to figure out if it is a developmental thing happening. Something that helped me in the early years, I'm always telling people about the Developing the Early Learner books in the early grades. It's in pre-K, in the pre-K package. So I've even had some people who were already in kindergarten who went back and got those books to go through. They are simple. They look so easy. I see parents go through them and say, oh yeah, my child could do all of this. And I thought that as well. But I had one student who felt confident, handed those things in, thought he was getting them all right. That was easy. And then when I went back and looked at them, I could see he felt successful when he was doing them. But there were, along the bottom of the page, there are these different categories. And it really did link to something that he was struggling with. And it was visual memory for him. And that was like the last piece that went into place before he started reading. And so he was kind of playing it off and answering questions with a little humor because he realized he didn't know the answer. So it was it took me some time to realize that he was struggling with something. So I didn't immediately know. And I thought he was just always joking around with his answers. And it took me a little time. And then there's, like I said, if you're wondering about some of those basic skills, pre-reading skills especially, I think the Developing the Early Learner books helped me find that it was legitimately something that my son was struggling with. So, yeah.
The other thing too is sometimes, especially if you have a young boy who just needs to move, it doesn't hurt to start the day off with movement. Take them outside and run them around the house a couple of times. Or if you've done one subject and you're getting ready to move into another, and that young man does not, is resisting you, get up, move, give him a chance to burn some energy and then come back.
Yeah. Even for girls, right? Like I was thinking about my daughter, we were learning prepositions, and this wasn't happy time. And she was, even though we had a song and that was great, some days it was fine. But one day she just, and so I said, you know what, come outside with me. And I found a ball or a bean bag. I can't remember what it was. And we tossed the bean bag back and forth, saying our prepositions. And that, you would have thought I invented ice cream. It was fine, right? We just need sometimes something to change things up a little. Math, if it's a stubbornness thing, it's a stubbornness thing. How about letting them do math on the whiteboard? My daughter thinks that's the coolest thing, right? If I put a problem up on the whiteboard and she does it on the whiteboard. So sometimes it's just changing things up a little and breathing a little life and excitement into things to help them over that little glitch.
What about the perfectionist? I have a twofold question here. So the first one is, how do you get a perfectionist to move past a mistake? But also, how do you encourage the growth mindset that would come along with, someone saying maybe, I can't do it, I can't do it. So it is two different questions, but I want you to think about that encouraging a growth mindset question too.
I feel pretty strongly about this. I have a couple perfectionists in my homeschool, and one thing I think that's really helpful to remember is that the goal is learning. And if we can really emphasize that with our children from the beginning, from the get-go, the goal is to learn. Have we learned? We're never going to know it all. So there are so many answers to that question, Stephanie. So I'm not answering this completely, but that's one big thing I would just love to put out there, that the goal is learning. Have I learned? Then that's a win, right? I've learned, it's a win. I think using Sunlight has helped our family because we don't give grades, for a long time in many subjects. The goal isn't a grade. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is, are you learning? What do you remember? What are we talking about? All of that, correct? I think early on with children who are doing paperwork or drawing a picture or something like that, for my perfectionist, I said she'd make a mistake and be so angry, like the dot's in the wrong place or something. And so I would say, let's have options. Give your kids options. You can do 3 things, sweetheart. You can keep what you've got and just move on. We can throw this away and start over, or you can turn this into something new. What would you like to do? And to give her power over that mistake that wasn't really a mistake, but to know I've got options. This isn't the end, and it's not ruined or over. We can move on, and maybe it's going to be something even better than you imagined to begin with.
I think for them to understand too that maybe you can use their perfectionism, that some subjects you can do immediately the first time, and there are some subjects that require practice. So the perfect thing you can do is to practice. And so start where you are, and let's look at today's, and let's look at tomorrow's, or let's look at how you do today, and then we're going to look back. You're going to do all your work in handwriting, and maybe it's not going to look perfectly, you're not going to line up every day, but let's look at it again in 3 months. We're going to pull out something he did 3 months ago, and you're going to put it side by side, and we're going to see some growth. So you're just kind of encouraging them to keep going and knowing that learning is part of this. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Maybe it's in math, and there's frustration about not remembering the facts or missing 3 problems or whatever. Maybe you say, look, we got this many correct. I love that our spelling UC does that for us. At the bottom of the page, it says, how many words did you spell correctly? And as you go through here, that number is going to grow. And so maybe focus on that and just encourage them to know that practicing is part of learning. If you just do the things you can do perfectly, you're never going to learn anything. So we want to move forward and, take that, challenge to do something new that we're going to not be perfect at right now, but we're going to grow in that area.
And
I think it helps
to do everything perfectly. You're God.
Exactly.
You don't need school. You don't need anything, right? You don't need. You're perfect. So nobody's perfect, and we're learning together. Mom's not perfect either. They need to know that. They need to see you fail, and for you to grow, right? So moms, careful of the self-talk. I do it too. You're a failure. You can't do it. You're no good. Even when you make a mistake, Mom, in your kids here, you say, oh, Amber, you're so dumb. Oh, that was so stupid. Stop doing that. They need to know that it's not stupid or dumb to drop a bowl of spaghetti on the floor. They need to know that's not stupid or dumb, that you're human and you're not perfect. And so we move on. No, we get better at carrying the bowl of spaghetti. Sorry, Judy, I interrupted you.
No, you said exactly what I was going to say. Be transparent and let your kids see you fail. In fact, if you're trying a new recipe in the kitchen and it doesn't turn out well, call your kids out to the kitchen, your perfectionist, and say, this is what I was trying to do. I failed at this, but I need to learn from this. So give me some suggestions for making this better. They need to understand that age is not important when it comes to learning. You fail when you're 10, you fail when you're 30. And like Amber said, if you always present yourself as the mom who can do no wrong or the dad who never makes mistakes, then you are setting your kids up for that attitude of, I can't grow, I can't do well unless I'm perfect like a mom or dad.
Yeah, I posted a blog that Sarita did a few years ago about that growth mindset, and maybe some things you can say that are that change that mindset. You know, like if you think about the approach to learning is you tried it, you did a great try, but you have to try again. No one can sew the minute they put, you know, a piece of material into the machine. No one can, you know, it's rare someone can play guitar the moment they pick it up. Everything deserves a little bit of practice, and that's the same with having your children have that growth mindset as well. So
yeah,
I'm seeing a lot of great.
I was just going to say, let me piggyback on that for a second. Moms, if you have time to do some summer reading, there are some really good books about growth mindset that you could just read for your own enrichment that really might transform your thinking and help you in your homeschool.
Yeah, I was going to say inventors that invented amazing things, you know, had lots of attempts that didn't work. And so there's some literature that you can read with your children and to see through stories, through the power of stories, that, you know, I'm not the only one that wasn't, you know, immediately able to do everything.
Yeah. It's funny. Rosa just commented, what about a child who's chatty? That was me, Rosa. Can you imagine? I was the chatty one.
Same. She's going to be a teacher.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
At a jar, it's great. With Sunlight, we've encouraged all of this out of the box thinking and all of this critical thinking, to where it does happen that they interrupt when you're in the middle of whatever you're doing, because they're like, ooh, this reminds me of, you know, and they want to connect everything, which is great. That's critical thinking. That's what we're, you know, fueling in them. So I had a jar of great questions that we will answer later. And so I had little slips of paper to put in the jar and to say, okay, we can research this topic. It's a great topic to research. But they knew that was my way of doing things as well. So I would be like, oh, and I would start going down the rabbit hole and we'd start researching something, and then we'd get off. So as much for me as for them, we started, you know, putting those things aside to research on another day.
And Christy, I think one more thought about a chatty child, Stephanie, is to make sure you do give them a chance to be chatty. So even if it's not always appropriate, they have to learn self-control, but promising them, okay, I'm going to set the timer. And so in 15 minutes, you're going to have the chance to ask any question you want. And we'll do that for 5 or 10 minutes. You know, again, set the timer. Timers can be your friend at this stage. And let them know, though, yeah, you're going to get your chance.
Yeah. And we have a lot of people commenting about book recommendations. I can tell you there's an author and a psychologist, I believe, Carol Dweck, Dweck. She's the one who did a lot of the research on growth mindset for education specifically. So look her up. I don't know if you had any other recommendations.
It's her book. It's her book. She has a book it's not like a tome. It's not for college. It's for normal people to read. It's her book. It's just really, it was my bathroom reading for a little bit.
Nice.
Where can I be that no one will bother me?
Yeah. I wish that was a place that I could be with.
Yeah. When my kids were under 5, that wasn't the place.
Okay. So let's see. Let's talk about motivating learners who shut down. So this kind of aligns with that growth mindset, that maybe perfectionist. What if they can't immediately do an assignment or get the right answer? Are there any other additional motivators you can think of that will help?
they may need inspiration. Like if they are not, if they find a subject, often with my guys, it wasn't across the board. It was subject specific. So maybe they're fine to do these subjects, but there's that one or two that they are, claiming I have no interest. When they're young, you have that excitement that they're eager to learn. They're eager, sometimes, generally speaking, my boys. And then at some point they realized, oh, school, people complain about school. Oh, this is something I don't love this subject. Or maybe they decide they hate a subject. And so I say that hate because I don't think they really, I don't know. Anyway, it's something I would argue in my mind about. But basically, if they're inspired, if they see maybe they are not a fan of fractions, for example, and when you're doing fractions, that's a problem. But if they love music, then you can bring in a link to that subject. Or if it's writing. And I saw a mom on one of our groups who added in some great science fiction to writing one day. I don't know if you guys saw that on one of the groups where they had like a fire-breathing dragon. She added to the story starter picture. And, she let the child add whatever he wanted to the picture. It was all the science fiction. And then he wrote about that, whatever it was that he wanted to write about. Well, then he was ready to do the assignment where he wasn't eager before. So I think just inspiring them by connecting it to something that they are interested in, that can be powerful.
I'd also like to remind us of the age and the developmental stage of your child. Okay, so if you're dealing with, say, a third grader who's struggling with math and they're getting really frustrated, you're asking them to deal with their frustration, to deal with how to do it correctly, to deal with moving on. That's a lot, right? So stopping and taking a break and working through it, that's a lot for an adult to handle. This overwhelming sense of frustration, but I can't figure out how to do it, but I have to keep moving, and we don't do that well, and then we're expecting the 8-year-old to do it well. So I think part of that is being mindful of their stage. I also think sometimes we fall in the trap of being afraid to reward our children or motivate them, like, well, it doesn't count unless they just like it. Well, my husband says all the time, I would not go to work if I didn't get a paycheck. And so that's the truth for all of us. It's hard to do work without a reward, a tangible reward. So I had my first 3 children, reading was its own reward. I never even thought about it. I hand them a book, they read it. My 4th child decided to stretch me and did not love reading. He can read okay. He can read fine. There's not a disability there, but he doesn't enjoy it. So as a 4th, 5th grader, I had to come up with motivators. So you read this book and I'm going to buy you a Matchbox car. He didn't know what it was. I would spend like $1 or $2. So I'm not talking about, we're not buying a Lamborghini or something because you read a book. I'm just talking about silly putty, some funny racer, a bottle of drink from someplace, whatever. Something that's $1 or $2 when he would finish a book. So my older son says, well, I didn't get any prizes when I read. No, but did you like to read? Yes. Okay. That's your reward. I'll look for other ways to reward you for other things that you don't like. But for that boy, it got him over the hump. So it doesn't have to be just that. But I'm giving you an example because you homeschool moms you got ideas coming out everywhere. So just run with that little idea that sometimes it takes a little bit of honey to help, a little sweetener.
And the same is true for teenagers. I've seen some questions roll by. You're talking a lot about younger children. What about teenagers? Yep. Teenagers are a different species. They really are. You have to factor in all of the things for them that Amber was describing for younger children. So teenagers are likely going through puberty or have gone through puberty and they're trying to adjust all the hormones rolling around in their brain. You are asking them to learn things that are much more difficult than what they had to learn in elementary and middle school. They can be easily distracted because they're beginning to develop their own interests and their own convictions and their own opinions and mindset about things. And so in my experience, dealing with teenagers was very similar to dealing with young adults. We needed to sit down and talk about what was going on. Much like when you start a college class, the professor gives you a syllabus and says to you, this is what is required for you to pass my class. You need to have that same conversation with your teenager. You need to be able to say, this is what's going to be required of you to successfully do academics here this year. Now, I want you to talk to me about what some of your interests are. What would you find exciting? Are you interested in finding a part-time job? Is there a hobby you'd like to follow up on? Is there a sport that you want? You need to have that conversation. I remember my mother telling me as my kids got to be the age of teenagers, the most important thing that you can do with your kids is develop that ongoing open communication between the two of you. And it is so, so important when they're teenagers.
Honesty and them being able to be honest. Yeah.
Yep.
And don't be discouraged, because I noticed, especially with my boys, that they kind of shut down around 11, 12. And I am just now with my 16-year-old seeing him again, kind of. It's a weird phenomenon, but there is so much going on in their bodies. What they say that in puberty for these guys, it's about as much change as from birth to 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. So the same amount, and you think of how gentle and patient, hopefully we were with our little ones, watching them change. These kids are going through a ton, and they may look like adults on the outside a little bit, but they're not. And they need us to be close and quiet and patient, because they are not who they will be. Their 25-year-old selves will not look like their 15-year-old selves.
Thankfully.
Yes.
And you have to be their biggest cheerleader. You really do. When they try something and fail, you have to be right there to encourage them to try again. When they try something and they're successful, you have to be there to tell them what a great job they did. And someone mentioned about setting expectations. Setting expectations with teenagers is huge. They can't read your mind. And so you have to let them know what your expectations are and be willing to discuss those with them in case they're struggling with one of your expectations or they don't understand why. It's not like when you look at your 5-year-old and say, because I said so. You can't do that with a teenager. You've got to have the conversation.
And in all things, they still need boundaries. They still need your protection. They still need help. And obviously you're beginning to loosen some. Don't abdicate all responsibility. They need that confidence that you're there holding the ropes for them. Soon enough, they will call the shots for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Soon enough.
I think too, communicating my expectations, their expectations, setting those out, looking at it and seeing if I can give a little on something. I think that's important, because if they can make a case for something, I think that's good for them to see that I'm listening, that I'm considering, that they're moving along in this, in getting older, and they have some say in their schooling. We sit down and I have a little planning meeting with this is a good time for that. This is a good time of year. Some people are not starting their year right now, but if you are, sitting down and kind of communicating, I think too, them knowing these are not all my requirements. These are our state requirements. And so it kind of takes you out of that bad guy seat for them to know that this is something that, is required. Even my son this weekend, he met with his advisor for college, and he had gone to a little thing that the music department had for non-majors. And he was like, oh, they offer this, I could do this. This would work well with my first semester. And the advisor said to him, oh no, you have to have this many hours before you can do an elective. Their entire lives, they're going to run into these kind of things in college, in life. You got to pay before you pay something else, all of those things. And so they're going to run into things. So it's good for them to know how to deal with requirements and always know that it's not coming from you.
I saw a note on the side too about the spread, it can be really daunting, Mom. I have a 12.5-year spread. So when my oldest, was 17, I've still got a 4-year-old and there's, or fifth, whatever, I'm not doing the math right now, but this is a hard spread. And you do feel like you're jerked between two different worlds. I feel that way now. I've got a young adult, 23, but I've got a 10-year-old. And sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind. So lots of prayer for grace as we help these older ones walk through this time.
I wanted to say we interviewed, Judy and I talked to a YouTuber, Sunlighter, a while back, and she said one time she had to expel her teenager because he just wasn't doing the work. And he actually asked to come back to school. I'm going to post in the comments here that video, watch it at your leisure. But yeah, it was very interesting to see what she did there. A little bit of tough love maybe, but it worked for her. She just couldn't get through him committing to school itself. And I will say the other thing we did, my daughter didn't want to do Spanish. And so I pulled up, she wants to go to college. So I pulled up the college requirements to get into college. And she was like, oh, I actually have to. She's in 7th grade. So younger than just a brand new teenager. But, she was like, oh, I'm actually going to have to do something to do that. So, even that long-term planning can really help. So
can I add one thing too that I think might be really important, which I didn't realize till my kids were older, is that it might be time, if you're not a person who enjoys co-ops, high school might be time to allow that to happen once in a while at least, or for a few courses at least, so that they get a sense of where they fit in the world. I don't know how else to say that, but I had one who really struggled because anyway, it would have been helpful if we had a little more time with others, learning with others, and not feeling so isolated and feeling so alone. So moms, and it's sometimes easy to say, oh, they'll grow out of this stage, they'll get to college, that's where their real friends are, whatever. The having the friends their age and having people that they're doing life with outside of you, it becomes more important. And that doesn't mean, just let them hang out under a bridge somewhere. I'm not talking about that. But you allow them to start having a little outside, maybe learning going on. It might be very motivating for them.
I think it's also important I totally agree with what Christy said about giving teenagers an opportunity to have input and to hear your expectations and maybe negotiate a little bit about what they would like to do differently. But there's also a line at which those teenagers have to learn respect. Someday they're going to leave home and they're going to need to be gainfully employed in order to live on this planet. If they want to eat, if they want a roof over their head, if they want 4 wheels to drive, they're going to have to learn to respect an employer. An employer is not going to love them like I loved them. An employer is not going to care if they forgot to eat breakfast that morning or didn't get enough sleep the night before. And so I remember having conversations with my teenagers about, I hear you. I appreciate your input. Please understand that I've heard what you've said. But someone mentioned earlier, what happens if my 15-year-old is still asking why? There comes a point in time when you have that conversation. Thank you for what you've shared. I love you and I appreciate your input. But there are times when I am still the authority in this situation and you are just going to have to accept what my decision is, just like you will have to do with an employer someday. Please hear me when I say that is so important, because over the course of my adult life, I have worked with adults who never learned that as a teenager. You are doing the world a favor if you can teach your teenagers to have that level of respect for whoever's in authority over them before they leave your house.
And Judy, we've been talking about teenagers a lot, but we really set the groundwork for that when they're young, right?
Yes.
So when
Absolutely.
they're young, requiring obedience, requiring respect, and treating them with respect too,
Mhm.
in the way that we discipline, in the way that we talk to them and to our spouses. And then that doesn't mean there won't be tension as they become teenagers, but it's not something brand new.
Right.
Absolutely.
My dad always says, I am your dad first and foremost. And I think that that's something to remember. It's easy to be their friend, but also you're the parent. So
Yes, definitely a line.
yes, for sure. So I want to, before we get into sibling rivalry, which is a very hard word for me, so I'm just going to say that right now. I don't know why. Every time I say it, I mess it up. So before we get into that, let's talk about motivating intelligent children. We got a question that says, I'd love some advice for motivating a very intelligent child to put effort into work. It seems easier to them, but going deeper and trying harder rather than doing the bare minimum because they're bored or not interested. So maybe just any ideas on how to motivate maybe a gifted child or someone who's working beyond their current level?
I always
Takers?
in the whatever their interest is, whatever, I just try to fuel that. Books at Christmas, more resources, looking for opportunities. I'm trying to think of different avenues. Maybe if they're gifted with computers, we have someone in our homeschool community who's a gifted computer programmer, and so she offers courses looking for people who are also maybe if it's a subject that's not your forte, looking for someone who can challenge them even more than you can. And that goes back to co-ops. I think we have a French teacher right now that is amazing, and my son is doing amazing. He's reading and writing and speaking and listening to everything on all the music he listens to right now is French. He's just immersed, and he's gotten this love of that through this class that he took that just really lit that interest. So I think fueling their interests and showing giving them more opportunities even that they might know of than they wouldn't know about otherwise.
And
And be
I would
willing
also
to say
go ahead, Judy.
and be willing to say maybe this level of math or this level of spelling or whatever is too easy for them, and allow them to move ahead. Ask them to demonstrate for you that they have the knowledge, that it's there, that they understand it. Maybe in math, require that they only do every other problem on the worksheet or whatever. And if you begin to see consistently that they're blowing through that math program, don't waste their time, because that's what it feels like to them, like you're wasting their time. And so feel free, even mid-year, to move them into the next level of math and find a level at which they're challenged.
I would also suggest that be careful that you aren't requiring them to love something as much as you think they should. I mean, depending on the age, they're still children. I don't know a lot of children that say, oh, I just love this literature. Thank you so much for having me read it, Mom. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have them read it. It just means you can't expect a 12-year-old to have an appreciation. I'm going to take you to the Louvre in Paris. Like, she should be impressed. What's the Louvre? Who cares? So I'm just saying, yes, she should be impressed, I guess. But at 12, maybe not. Okay. So they don't know always. And so I think even, just keep having them read and listening to books. I mean, along with everything else that's already been said, but maybe don't expect them to just be like ball drops, disco lights, confetti every time they're learning. It's not always going to be like that.
And someone just asked, well, what if I've bought that math program and it's too easy for them? Just like with anything else in life that is a priority for you, you're going to have to invest some financially. And so really, it's kind of a weighing thing. What is a better option? Is it better to spend a little extra money and get them a math program that doesn't put them to sleep? Or is it better to say, nope, I bought it. We have to use this math program and wrestle every single day because they're so bored?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading all your comments to see if there's a place I want to go next before that sibling issue. I'm not going to say the rivalry.
We'll help you out.
Thank you. Anyway, I was just reading through some of these questions that were coming in, and I think it's good. It's a good time to talk about siblings. It's a good time to talk about, what if you have a big there's many different things. You have a big family, everyone needs attention. But also, what about if you're having, an older student who refuses to try, or a younger sibling who's faster at academics? Like, what happens if the younger one is sort of advancing past the older one, or any sibling issues that you might think? How do you handle them? I know you've all had them because you have multiple children, and anytime you have more than one, you're going to have that. So let's talk about it.
Well, that was a lot of things. So
sorry.
When I was looking over this outline for today, one of the first things that popped into my head, and this probably isn't a new concept, but it bears repeating: no comparisons. As moms, parents in general, don't talk about your children in front of them. Don't talk about how wonderful so-and-so is in front of all the other kids. It's not helpful. That doesn't mean there isn't a time to praise your child or to make a big deal about them, but you have to be super sensitive, because your innocent praise can sound like criticism for someone else. So you just need to be very, very careful. And then just the act of not comparing them. Oh, well, when your sister was in second grade, her handwriting was much better than this. Maybe none of you do that so blatantly, but we can do it in a kind of subtle way if we're not careful. So I think that would be the first thing: is do not foster comparison in your home between your children. Don't do that by your own comments. Be careful.
And I think the second step is what we said earlier about being your child's biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
If an older student is watching a younger sibling fly by them in math, and they're thinking that they're stupid or dumb, or they just can't imagine why this kid who's younger than they are can do math better than them, then you need to ramp up your cheerleading in the areas where that child does excel, and remind them that there's always room to grow, and they may have to work a little harder in math, but boy, they are phenomenal at writing stories. And you just have to constantly look for ways to encourage in those areas where they do well.
And just emphasize strengths. Everyone has strengths. And yeah, we definitely have had this in our house with different, one with a student with developmental needs and different things through the years. And so, but every single one of my guys has strengths that we have emphasized, and that we've been honest, talk to them one-on-one, try to work with them one-on-one. I think if you can, we invested in headphones for the piano. So if there is a subject where that someone's going to be zooming ahead and it's going to be in the hearing of someone who is not, hey, piano time for, that was one thing that we did. Or we worked downstairs and asked, hey, why don't you go do your reading upstairs? We don't have a lot of square footage we're working with, but we worked with what we had, and we without making without them knowing why you were doing that. I think you can, work with that a little bit, where they're not just be mindful of them being in the hearing of someone zooming ahead or lagging behind. And I found out one time, I like to double check things. And I found out that my children didn't think I could spell. I'm like, I want spelling bees, but I'm always asking my husband to double check. And so they decided, just because they kept hearing it, oh, mommy can't spell, and I didn't realize that until it was one of my younger boys that I realized he was thinking that. And I was like, no, I'm a great speller. I'm extra careful, and I'm double checking and dotting my I's and crossing my T's. I think not being in the hearing of it can be helpful. If you can.
One of the things that I love that I've heard Sarita say many, many times when she talks about raising her kids, they had a rule in their house, and it was a very simple rule, and it was no put downs allowed. Mm-hmm. And so anytime she would hear one of her kids mocking or saying something unkind or comparing to another child, she would say, no put downs allowed. And sometimes it's just as simple as that. You have a family rule. You're a team as a family. You're supporting one another. We're in this together, and we get so much further, and we do so many more fun things when we work together as a team. But you can't be a team if you can't work together as teammates. And that involves encouraging one another. In our household, we had a saying that we tried always to develop a servant's heart or a servant attitude. How can you serve your brother today? What could you do to make his day better? He's having a hard time. What could you do to encourage him? So I think just fostering that kind of environment in your home is helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I will stop things and say, in this house, we all love each other unconditionally. God gave us each other as a family. Not everyone in the world is going to love me unconditionally, or you. But in this house, we are going to love each other and accept one another unconditionally. And you'll all always have that. And we're going to extend it to each other. And that's a huge value that I communicate over and over again to our boys so that they know we are unconditional here,
And how about framing the conversation too, moms, because it's hard for us to watch our kids struggle with something, or even that's just a hard place to be, right? When the younger sibling is doing better, especially if you have a sensitive child. But guess what? Maybe this is what God is doing to help build in them some kind of strength, some kind of gift that you don't even know about yet. And that this struggle and this learning that other people might be better at something than I am, and I need to learn to accept that with humility. But that doesn't mean that I'm not good at anything and that I might be just as good, but I have to work a little harder. Those sorts of character qualities are beautiful. And maybe we would deny our children growth in those areas if we didn't help them and teach them how to work through that. If we're always just like, oh, you're wonderful, it's okay, what's it? There are ways to frame that conversation that can really help them grow. And you can still be loving.
I wanted to say we've had a few people ask, how do you get it all done? And so I think that it's a good idea right now to talk about ideas of maybe homeschooling a large family, making everyone feel like they're getting the same sort of attention. Because I do think that if you're not doing that properly, or that could cause some of the sibling issues.
True.
Any ideas?
I think it's important that each child feels like they have mom time or dad time. I know in one of our preschool sessions that we recorded, we talked about filling a younger child's mom tank every morning, first thing. Little kids don't understand easily. Mommy will get to you if you can just wait until I'm done with math with your older brother. All they understand is I haven't been hugged and loved and kissed today, and my mom tank is empty, and I need you, Mom. And that's why when you're doing math, your toddler is hanging onto your leg and crying. And so I think finding a way to work into your schedule individual mom time, even if it's just on some days a short amount of time, the fact that you stop and you make eye contact with that child and you spend a few minutes just hearing them and understanding what they're saying and listening to them, not looking over to see what the other brother's doing or thinking about what was it I was cooking for dinner tonight. They need your undivided attention, and the younger they are, the earlier in the day they need it.
And I think with teenagers too, sometimes
Yes.
when you feel that pulling away, sometimes if I just make a point to take someone with me when I'm going somewhere, just one person in the car is huge. And I'm amazed by how much a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old boy will say when it's just me and him in the car, and how much insight I get into what's really going on in there whenever I've taken a little time just have one-on-one where we can make that happen. And going out for a walk even, just with one would be great.
And you're right, Amy. Teaching math doesn't count as mom time.
Yeah.
No, I was
Scheduling we've talked about before. So if you can't finish everything some days. There are just days that you will not get to everything, as someone said, I think. There are days that you won't, and that's okay. Go back to the perfectionist and listen to that part again. For us, we won't finish everything on some days. And that loop scheduling that we've talked about before, where whatever you didn't finish yesterday, this could work with children as well. If you didn't have the time to get to everyone and you lay on your head on the pillow and think, oh, I know this one needed a little more today and I never got to that thing that he wanted to do, then you can make that a priority the next day. Use loop scheduling for your time with your children as well. If you aren't able to do that you can't every day connect as much as you want to with everybody. That happens, definitely. So just make it a priority the next day. I think that can work.
Let me say this too, if you have a lot of children in a large spread. So I had 5 and doing everything at once with them. I went to a convention and there was a woman who has I think it's a little book, it's been years ago, but called Managers of Their Homes. And I pulled out just a couple principles from her that served me well. And one of them was when we came up with our schedule for the year, I would schedule times for my oldest child to be with my youngest child. As much as you can make that happen, a 9-year-old can play with a 3-year-old for a half hour. And so that was part of their school day. So the 3-year-old had time with mommy, had time with the 9-year-old and the 11-year-old and the 13-year-old. There was a half hour that little child had with each of us. So it doesn't just have to be mom. God didn't make a mistake when he put all your kids in this family, this many kids. And there are beautiful, wonderful things that they're going to get to learn from each other, not just from mom. So it doesn't have to be just you. And then I love what Christy said. That's right. With our older kids, I think part of the thing with our older kids, and depending on their personality, they don't always need inordinate amounts of time. They need our attention so that when they are speaking to us, they actually know we heard them. Yes. And that we're there, we're present when they're trying to speak to us and tell us. And if we can't be present, assuring them that we will give them time later. So I hope that's somewhat helpful.
We have one more question. We've got a lot of questions. Believe me, I'm trying to copy them so we can go back to you at some point. But I have one more question I want to tackle, and then we're going to give you a break for lunch. It is what to do when a child wants to finish everything fast and not giving it their best, sort of the opposite of a perfectionist. We've had a few of these people pop in here, so I want to make sure we address that specifically.
I had one of those children. That child's goal in life was to get school done as quickly as possible so that he could go on to something much more interesting, like playing outside or watching something on television or whatever. And yeah, they could have cared less at that age, particular age, about how well the work was accomplished or if we learned anything at all. It was just check the boxes and walk away from mom. And that, I think, primarily, at least in my case, was a maturity issue to some degree. This was a child that just had to grow into understanding of responsibility and to develop a desire to do well at whatever he did. And so we talked a lot about that character trait because that's what it is a character quality. We talked a lot about different scriptures that talk about working with your hands and doing well, whatever you do, as unto the Lord, and not wanting people to see a half-hearted job done. Or we talked about the quality of work, and what would it be like if you went to the bakery and you ordered a chocolate chip cookie, and when the baker brought it out, it was raw dough because he was in such a hurry to get it out of the oven and get it to you.
Or it didn't have chocolate chips.
Or
that would be worse.
It would be terrible. And so I think it's just a lot of working with that individual child. Every child is unique. They all have their own personality. And you as the mom or dad know that child better than anyone else does. And you're just going to have to work with that attitude to develop that character trait of perseverance and a desire to do excellent work, instead of just, checking off the box and walking away.
And Judy, what you're talking about doesn't happen in a week or a month or necessarily in one school year. So if we're in this for the long haul, and if we're parents, we're in it for the long haul, whether you continue to homeschool or not, that character quality, though, that you're talking about, Judy, this is a marathon issue. I know we talk about this, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. Your child isn't going to learn how to do their work as unto the Lord and not unto men with all of their heart, blah, blah, blah. What we want, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Right. It's going to be an investment. And it's going to be a joy to watch them grow and change.
Yeah.
And that goes back to how they can be in high school and as adults. These are all traits that you want them to have as you launch them into adulthood. So absolutely. Well, we went way over, but I think it was a great conversation. I'm so glad that you guys joined us. We'll be back live at 4 p.m. Mountain Time today. So bring your questions there. We'll be answering them there as well. And then, so enjoy your break or go back and watch videos if you have a babysitter. And enjoy the day, and we'll see you at 4. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
It's always hard to find the button.